Welcome everybody to our GP 2018 webinar. So in this webinar, we're going to be going over some of the new features and some of the updates that are available in the latest version of GP that came out December 3rd. A little bit of a change from our normal format because with this kind of a webinar, we're jumping all over the place in GP. It's not a single topic of functionality. We're going to use screenshots instead of actual live tour just to keep things rolling along faster. So yeah, a couple of housekeeping items. Anybody that has questions, you might notice you're not able to speak to us, or at least we're not able to hear you. So if you have questions, if you look at the GoToWebinar widget that should be at the top right of your desktop, there's a little section for questions. So if you want to go ahead and ask any questions that you have there, at the end of the webinar, we will be going through all the list and answering anything that's in that section. So feel free to put your questions there. So with that, maybe let's move to the first slide. So first, I'll just introduce myself and Itsam. So Itsam is the consultant that's going to run us through all the new functionality, and he's a GP consultant here at ADEM. Then we're going to talk about the new features in GP 2018, and then we're going to talk about our upcoming events and a shameless plug, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So let's move to the next slide. There we go. There's our Christmas picture. For those of you that joined us last time, which was only a couple of weeks ago, you'll recognize the Christmas party. ADEM is the proprietor of GP365, which is the little icon you see on the right. And we're also, we've been doing Dynamics GP implementations and support for a little over or a little under 20 years. So we pretty much live, breathe, and eat the Dynamics family of products over here. It's our lifeblood. And yeah. So if you ever have any questions, please reach out to our team. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Itsam so that he can start talking about the good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. All right, guys. So what we're going to be covering in this webinar is essentially just what I'm just going to touch up on what basically Jason said. So GP 2018 was released on December, and with this release, there's actually a lot of cool features. And due to the limitation of time, what I'll be doing is I'll be giving you a high-level overview of the features, and we'll be showing you the screenshots of what they look like and how you can kind of use them within GP. Now, for the main part, the enhancements and the features have been broken down into these categories. We're going to be covering some of the more important ones. So I think, for example, Workflow 4.0 is one of the ones that has a lot of changes, as well as some of the core enhancements that have been added to GP. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing we have is platform and system-wide changes. Now there are only two, and one of the biggest, I think one of the best enhancements that they've done in this is the fact that when you're in the system manager, you only have to log in once, as opposed to being prompted to ask the login many times. Especially for a lot of the IT people who might be on the webinar, you know, if you're in system manager and you create a user, when you need to go to the system administration tree and create a user, you'll be prompted to provide a system password. And once you fill that in, obviously the next thing to do is to assign the roles. And again, the system would prompt you for the system password. So with this, what GP has done is it'll only prompt you for your password once, and any additional system password prompts will be suppressed until the user closes the current Dynamics GP session. This will help, you know, avoid having to enter in your system passwords repeatedly time and time again. And this was something that was a little bit of a pain point for a lot of our clients. And for some of the functional people who are on the call, you know, if you notice you have to go in and enter in your foreign exchange rate setups, again, it would ask you and keep on prompting you for your system password. With this new feature, you only have to log in once, and as long as you've entered the correct password and your session is maintained, it won't ask you to re-enter your password. All right. So the next feature that we have for platform and system-wide changes is the comprehensive document attachments for the master inquiry and transaction entry windows. Essentially, what this will let you do is attach documents to these individual screens. Now, this was something that was highly requested, and Microsoft actually went in and allowed this enhancement. So you can see this little chart here lets you know which screens and which windows you can go in and attach the document documents to. So what I will do is I'll actually show you how to first enable it and then what it kind of looks like on the individual screen. So again, just like before, you'd come in here, you click the radio button to allow document attachment. After here at the bottom here, you can also choose whether or not you want this to flow. You want the documents to flow from master to document. Of course, once it's enabled, I'll show you what it kind of looks like. So if you have a receivable or a GL transaction entry screen, you'll see the attach buttons right at the top here. And you can attach the documents for easier access. And this makes a lot of sense because you want to make sure from an auditing perspective, you have all of your invoices and transactions in one place. So you can kind of track, you can track the document and see how it originated, what the originals were. So this is a great tool that GP has entered in. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is Workflow 4.0. So there's a couple of changes from the old Workflow 3.0, and some of the main ones being that you can now actually send reminder emails. So if there's any pending actions that need to be performed, the system can send out those reminder emails. You know, if you get something in your workflow and life can get busy, and sometimes you forget, you can also set up a reminder email as well as a reminder time as to when to send out a message saying, hey, there's something that needs your attention. So if you could have a look at it, that'd be great. And I'm going to be showing you in a few slides what that kind of actually looks like and where you actually set that up. So we'll do that. And the other thing another great enhancement is the ability to copy workflow steps. So the main themes that you're gonna notice that Microsoft's been pushing is a lot more productivity and efficiency, because whatever they can do to kind of help make your life a little bit easier, and get what you need to done in a faster manner is always welcome. So you're going to be noticing that recurring theme throughout a lot of these enhancements. So with copying workflow steps, what it allows you to do is to copy the workflow steps from one workflow to another, if they're in the same workflow type in GP 2018, and user have the flexibility of copying a sub-step as well. So what that means is it can serve as a template for you, so you don't have to start from scratch. You can copy the workflow they have, and then from there just go in and customize it and modify it to what you need to do for the new workflow. All right, so that is one of the other features that we have. The other thing we have is a report for workflow. Essentially what this does is it's a report for, this report is a workflow transaction history report, and it also gives you the option to sort by workflow type. Essentially what it allows you to do is to create it allows you to sort your workflow by workflow type, workflow users, completion, or due date. And of course, you have the option of going in and choosing different parameters for running your workflow report. Okay. Then we have the additional fields for payable transactions. So they've added in a couple of additional fields that can be used. Mainly, they've added 4 or 5. They've added 4. Well, one of them being the vendor account, comment 1 and 2, vendor class, and payment priority. All right. Number 5, they've also actually added a additional message for your PO workflow email. So, and more specifically, they've actually entered the account description field. So when you are creating your emails for your purchase order workflow, you can now choose the field account description to be included in your email itself. And the last thing we have, and this is one of the big ones, is you can now create a workflow for creating GL accounts as well as for purchasing invoices. So what this will essentially allow you to do is it allows you to control what gets entered into your system. So by having a new workflow for your GL accounts, you're giving more control, and you're making sure that everything that is going into your system is approved and it's gone through the right channel. So that's one of the things they've done by including these two new workflows. So let me show you what they kind of look like. So over here, I've kind of showed you the workflow for creating a new GL account, and you can see at the top here that this is where so it's just similar to how it was before, where you would create a workflow, but this time we're creating a workflow for creating new GL accounts. At the bottom here, this is where you can choose the time limits, as I was mentioning earlier with regards to the reminder. So over here, if the task for the workflow response is, let's say, 8 hours, or which is usually a business day, you can make sure the reminder goes out 4 hours, 3 hours, or so on and so forth. And you can also send a customized message here. So you can see at the bottom here, you have the lookup button. Of course, if you have previously saved templates for your message, you can go in and edit those and attach those ones to your workflow that you can then to the email that you can then send out to the appropriate party. All right. Okay, so next thing we are going to look at is our user experience enhancement. So another big one is having a unique password for individual smart lists that you create, especially the ones that are your favorite smart lists. One of the complaints, well, not one of the pain points was that a lot of the smart lists that that somebody would create would eventually end up getting modified by somebody else within the organization. So this kind of gives you a little bit more control in that regard, because what it will ask you to, it'll prompt you for a password in order to go in and modify your report. So this is a great way to ensure that the reports that you create are not being modified by anybody else within the company and are actually being being used the way they should be. So that is one thing. So by having a password there, it gives you more control and makes sure that nobody's able to go in and make any changes to the smart list reports that you've created. Okay. Then we also have a shortcut for your web client. This is essentially a one-click access to smart list in the web client. Actually, a new link has actually been added to the top right-hand side of the web client window labeled smart list. And what it'll do is right from the web client, it allows you to come in directly to the smart list window within GP. Okay. And then we've also added the autocomplete functionality. So again, as I mentioned earlier, it's the recurring theme of productivity, making sure you're more efficient and getting everything done on time. So with autocomplete functionality within GP, what it'll is basically come onto the web client. So if there's any previous entry, if you've entered any previously entered values on a field, the users will then be presented with a drop-down menu where they can select the matching partially entered value, and if they don't want it, then they can obviously click on the drop-down menu itself, and you can use the autocomplete in that from that field. Of course, you have the option of using your mouse or simply using your keyboard to select the values. All right, another thing we've done in GP 28, and Microsoft has done in GP 2018, is they've updated our help icons. So you actually have updated icons, help icons for GP 2018. And one of the other option, and the other thing that we have is the bank reconciliation screen on the web client can now be maximized to see more transactions while performing a bank rec. This will essentially reduce the amount of scrolling that a user needs to do to find transactions. And one of the greatest things about this is if you're working on a bank reconciliation, having to scroll through and not being able to expand can be a little bit annoying. So this will essentially allow you to maximize it to see, so you can utilize more of your screen real estate to see where the transactions are. It makes it easier for you to match everything. All right, and the other thing they've done for user experience enhancement is additional sorting options have been added. So sorting options have actually been added to the windows in the table listed below, and essentially what it does is it allows users to sort based on these different options, and these can be viewed in an ascending or descending fashion, and it makes it easier for you to find the data that you're looking for and gives you more, and you're able to find or apply more filters, if you will, to find the data you're looking for more efficiently. So this is kind of what it looks like on these screens. So one of the screens I'm using for this example is just the receivable transaction or customer receivable transaction inquiry screen. You can see at the type or in the type drop down, you have the additional types to sort, and you can also choose whether or not you want to list it in a ascending or descending order. One thing I forgot to mention was there are actually some enhancements for BI. However, we're actually going to be doing a webinar just because there's a lot to cover in that regard. So there are some enhancements they've done from BI, but that's a pretty big topic, so we'll cover that in one additional in a separate webinar. Okay, now we jump on to the core functionality, the good stuff, the meat, that everybody's been waiting for. So the first thing we have is basically you can now have one payment per invoice or one payment per vendor. What GP 2018 now allows you to do is basically the choice of the payment option is to choose a single payment per vendor or an individual invoice. The choice of the payment option is made actually on the vendor maintenance window, and the default setting is then used to generate a single payment per vendor when you build a payment batch using the build payment batch window. Okay, and the other thing we can, and of course this is for purchasing or the AP side of the purchasing series of GP. And then you can also copy user access across dimensions in analytical accounting in the financial core of the software. Basically, what this does is allows you to copy the user access across dimensions in the analytical accounting screen. This feature basically is an easy way to copy all your information. This wasn't there before, so you can copy the the roles from one user to another, and you don't have to start from scratch to do it. Okay. Again, this is another feature that will basically help expedite the time it takes to grant new user access or to grant a new user access. All right, and then of course to save efficiency, and you're going to see a screenshot for this one. Essentially, is what GP has done is it allows you to save your select payment settings. So. And this is in the purchasing series, and essentially what it does is, the payment settings are usually more or less 90% of the time the same from one batch to another. So instead of having to go back in and individually select those payments, you can save your settings, and you can save them using the payment option ID field. And with that payment option ID field, you can set up what you want to use, and then you can use, when you're creating a payment batch, you can select that payment option ID for future batches to be used, and that way it'll automatically fill those settings in for you, so you don't have to go in and pick and choose those every single time. Essentially saving the user a lot more time and helping you process your payments a lot faster. Okay, and I'll be showing a screenshot after I cover the remaining two, and we'll see the screenshot of what they look like and what they kind of look like within GP. All right. The other thing we have is one of the big ones is for the core enhancements is printing single statements from customer maintenance screen. So GP will now actually allow you to print customer statements, and essentially the statements can be printed into a PDF format, and from there you can actually email those statements out if you like, or you can print them and attach them to the invoice itself. So the statement will actually use the format that's been assigned in the receivable setup window, and you can always go in and customize those templates. So if you want to have a different template, something that matches your business, then you can obviously go in and do that. Okay, and the last thing we have is a lot of the screens within GP have been renamed, at least on the purchasing side of things. That was done mostly because a lot of the time the payment method is no longer check. It's just, as we're moving more and more towards EFT, they just match the screen name. So instead of calling it check, payable check now, it's now payment check. So some of the screens that have been renamed are the select payable checks is again changed to build payment batch. Edit check batch is now edit payment batch. Edit check is now edit vendor payment. Print check is now print payment, and post checks is post payment. So essentially, they're just matching the changes that are occurring when we're moving more and more away from check and moving more towards EFT. So just to match the terminology, they've kind of changed the screen names. So as I mentioned earlier, this is where you could save your select payment settings. So you can see here on the left-hand side, you have the little payment setting here, and based on the payment option ID, once you open it, you can go in and define your defaults. And when you create your payment batch, when you're building your payment batch, in the future, you can go in and simply select that payment ID, and it'll pull in all those settings that you've saved for that for that payment batch. For that payment option. Okay, and again, to print your customer statements in the customer maintenance screen over here at the top here, you can simply select this print drop down, and from here you can go ahead and print your statements, and it'll print it out into this format for you, which of course you can then, so you can see here it printed out the comment, and from here it's just being emailed out to the appropriate customer. All right, and the other thing we talked about was renaming the check to payment screen. So you can see here it's no longer print checks, it's print payments. So a lot of these screens will still function the same way. It's just the name for those screens has been changed. Okay, so then we have our distribution and supply chain enhancements. Over here, essentially what allows you to, what some of the changes that GP GP 2018 brings with it are when a PO is created from the purchase order generator, the newest PO will actually be displayed in the order transaction list. This of course makes sense. You want to make sure you see the first PO because that's the one that you just created, and of course that list is filtered for the users so that the newest POs appear first. You want to make sure because that's the time you want to make sure, hey, which is a PO that I'm still waiting on, or still needs to be approved. All right, then we have our purchase order originator. So when a purchase order is created from a requisition, the PO information is displayed on the requisition list. So the requisition originator can be aware of the items that have been ordered. Essentially what it does is it allows you to see what's been ordered so that you're not over ordering or under ordering for something, and basically making sure that you're getting all the information in advance so nothing is missed. All right. And of course, this enhancement also displays the PO number on the procurement role center. Okay. And another thing that GP has done is it allows you to print your purchase requisition report, and I'm going to actually show you a screenshot for that as well. Essentially what it does is you can print a purchase requisition report from the requisition entry or from the requisition list windows that you can send out to whoever might want to have a look at it, just so you have something to kind of say, hey, this is what I sent to you, and then it opens up a dialogue that way. Okay, and lastly, we have an ability to put a transaction on hold. There's essentially a hold status that you can put on sales transaction entry, and basically it's just a stop sign that you'll see. So I'm going to kind of show you what those look like. So the first one, again, as I mentioned earlier, was the print requisition screenshot. So on the print requisition entry screen, you can go ahead and print the requisition itself that you could then later send on. And lastly, we have the sales transaction. So you can see here, this is the stop sign you have, the little, when a transaction is on hold, you'll see the little stop sign here letting you know that there's a hold on this transaction for whatever reason. And of course, from there, you can go in and investigate and figure out, why do we have this thing on hold? All right. So the next thing we have is HR and payroll enhancements. So one key thing to note is this is essentially for the US payroll. The Canadian payroll will have a different update. Okay, so first things first, we've turned off GPS turned off garnishment reports in posting setup. Essentially, what this does is gives you additional control over printing your garnishment reports. So essentially, in the posting setup in Payroll, you can select whether or not you want the option for the garnishment reports to be printed or not to be printed. So before you didn't have that option, it would always print for you, but now you can turn that off so you don't have to go in and through that extra clicking to say, no, I don't want to print it. All right. Okay, and and the other thing that has happened within GP is now when users go in and change the department code, it'll change the department code automatically, and it'll update all the tables contained the department code, including the history table. So you don't have to worry about your inconsistency in your department codes not matching with your history data and your current data. Okay, and another enhancement that GP 2018 brings with it is the users can now also restrict what shows up in the deduction lookup window. And essentially what this is doing is making sure that none of the it's something that you don't want to see, especially the inactive records, are not showing on the lookup window on a per user basis. So you can restrict this, of course, you can restrict both company benefits and deductions as well as employee benefits and deductions on these lookups. All right, and the last thing we have for payroll is essentially the ability to roll down option to inactive records. So if you go in and make any changes to your payroll, so for example, if you change your 401k maximum for all employees, for all employee records in the current year, typically you would want this to roll down to all employees. However, if the employee was inactive, then it wouldn't roll down these changes. And then eventually when the employee does become active, you'll see the inconsistency in the 401k maximum. So what this will do is anytime you go in and try to create any changes, you'll get a little pop-up like this. So you can see here you have a pop-up where it says, do you want these changes to be rolled down to only active records, all records, or none? Essentially what this will do, if you select the option of active record, what it's going to do is it's only going to update the options for only the active employees, where if you do all records, it'll update everything, including inactive ones. So that way, when they do become active, everything's okay. And of course, none is if you don't want to make any changes. Now, one thing to note is When you choose to roll down the changes for all active records, sorry, for all active records, all records are none. If you choose all records, then every record, including the inactive ones, will be uploaded, and the roll down message will actually be included in the following windows. It'll be included in pay codes, deductions, benefits, and shift setup. All right. So these are all the changes, that GP 2018 has brought with itself. These are some of the more enhancements, some of the more bigger enhancements that have come with GP. So with that being said, I'm going to now pass it over to Jason.
Great. Thanks very much. That's awesome. So before we talk about our next events, obviously the GP 2018 release comes with a lot of updates, so it's hard to sort of go over all of them in a single session. A lot of them are bug fixes and enhancements of that nature. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at support@atom.com. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have about any other functionality. So with that, we'll talk about our next event. So right now we only have one scheduled event, which is for February 22nd. We're going to be talking about project accounting. So this is going to be a high-level overview of the project accounting function in GP. It won't dig into into the guts of it, but it's just to give everybody an idea of what it does and how it works. And I'll be the one actually presenting that one. So I hope you can join us. And while we're on the topic, so for future webinars, which we're going to be planning out our next 6 months, we are taking requests. So if you email us at info@gp365.ca with a topic that you'd like us to cover, we're going to basically gather all the results from all the different attendees, and sort of the ones that are most popular are the ones that we're going to put into the list. So feel free to send us your requests, and we'll try to make sure that we cover as many of those topics as we can. All right, let's flip to the next slide. So now the shameless plug. So before we talk about the shameless plug, I guess if you go to our website, which is gp365.ca, we're constantly developing new blogs, basic information about GP functionality, how to use it, reviews of some of the different topics as well. So please feel free to check it out. And obviously, if you are ever in the need of any GP assistance, we'd love you to give us a call. Support@atom.com is where you can reach us for support, and we'd love to engage with you guys. And I think after that, we can turn it over to Q&A. So let me see if we have any questions here. Okay, yep, there's a few. So the first one is, what's included in the Canadian payroll update?
Yeah, so with the new Canadian payroll update, essentially it's just an update for a lot of the tax rates, as well as some of the tax forms that are in GP. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head which form it is, but the update is mostly just for the tax tables.
Yeah, so there's no functionality updates there. It's just maintenance. It's a maintenance release, so it's updating your payroll tax tables, and I believe the form that changes the T4 summary. So it's just altering the alignment so that it prints properly and it can be submitted. So, and the next question is, are there any space limitations to the document attachment feature?
Space limitations for document. I don't believe there are. I think depending on the server you're using, you can upload as much as you like.
Yeah, I think it's only restricted by the capacity of the disk drives on the server itself. So usually that's not a problem with today's storage. But one thing I can offer a plug there is if you're on the GP365 platform, there is no limit. That I can say for sure. But otherwise, if you're hosting on premise or in somebody else's cloud, it depends on how much drive space is available. So every attachment will consume some space on the server. And I think that is the last, that's the last question I see. So with that, I guess we can give everybody back about 30 minutes of their time. You can all go back to your normal work, and we thank everybody for attending.
Awesome.